I come from Chicago, and the fun thing about Chicago is we have term limits. 1 term in office, 1 term in jail. A little bit different than most. We have perfected the vote early, vote often model. My grandmother was a Republican precinct committee woman on the north side of town her whole life. She passed away in 1992, and she's been voting Democrat ever since. But unfortunately, it's true. So yes, I am an unapologetic community organizer from Chicago. However, I brand myself as that and our organization because I felt that we lost in 2012 especially, not just on the federal level but on state and local levels, not because we did not run enough television advertisements or we did not put forth flashy enough radio spots or we did not hire the right consultants. I felt that we got out-organized and we got outworked on the grassroots level. They had better and more people doing the clipboard and tennis shoes type of work on the ground years before ballots were even cast, identifying, gathering, organizing, and segmenting people young and old to be able to elect someone who should never have been elected President of the United States in the first place, but then re-elect him on really a message that most people did not really even understand. What I find most interesting, our organization has now grown to 1,000 campuses nationwide. We have over 41 people on our full-time field staff, and it's exploding even beyond that to high schools and even community colleges, is young people are increasingly skeptical of big governmental power, and they are looking for an alternative point of view. However, we have to be there to deliver it in a way that they can understand, and they will accept it on a person-to-person, peer-to-peer basis. And that's what our organization does on a daily basis. So a little bit more background. I founded this on June 5th of 2012, right out of high school. I unfortunately got denied to the United States Military Academy at West Point. I lost my spot out to a far less qualified applicant that was of a different minority persuasion, let me put it that way. And the Academy articulated that in a letter to me. So I was not sure what I wanted to do when I was a senior in high school. I started shopping around to colleges, and the prospect or the idea of going to a very expensive school and taking out $200,000 to $300,000 in student loans to go study something I wasn't that passionate about did not really appeal to me. So I started to go to local political functions, and I soon realized I was the youngest person in the room by 60 or 70 years sometimes. And I said, this is not sustainable. This cannot work if we want to not just win in the short term, but if we want to create a movement around the ideas that have made Western civilization so great. So I went to my local Republican and conservative leaders, and I said, we need to get a vibrant, organic, grassroots-centric student movement in our high schools and our colleges. I even told them that once a week, MoveOn.org and Obama for America would come into our cafeterias with clipboards and leftist propaganda through the teachers, through the political science departments, trying to push this agenda to students on a nonstop, 24/7, 365 basis. And the Illinois Republican Party leadership, and at the time there was very little, they really didn't take me too seriously, ignored me, cast me aside, said, oh, you're just another one of those young kids that want to try to get a youth movement started. 3 years later, we can kind of say it is possible with 1,000 campuses and now spreading to all 50 states and D.C. and even rapidly expanding into some other countries that want to incorporate some of our chapters on their college campuses. What excites me the most, though, and we just finished up our Young Women's Leadership Summit in Chicago for our top 150 young female activists from 37 different states. We had a young gal from East Compton, Los Angeles. For those of you from LA, you know that's not a typical beacon of conservative thought. We had people from all sorts of different ethnic and political backgrounds. What excites me the most when I'm able to be around these young ladies or these young students is their optimism for the future of this country, but also their demand for principled leadership and not just political leadership. And that's what really gets me fired up and gets me to work every day. Is it's not they just don't want Republican leaders, they just don't want the GOP to be in charge, but they want the right ideas to be implemented the right way. Because as we all know, there's good Republicans and bad Republicans. Not all the Republicans we put into office are going to govern with the right principles and put them forth. So what I see currently is our organization right now has the largest grassroots focused campus program in the country, but unfortunately on the conservative side, Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton right now has over 220 full-time paid organizers in key battleground states that are doing nothing but canvassing dorm rooms, talking to students on a one-to-one basis, getting them pledged to go caucus, collecting their information, putting them in a database. So Hillary Clinton has collected, I think, between 11 to 13 million emails, and she won't lose these emails, mind you, of young people organically on a person-to-person basis that she will then be able to utilize effectively for electoral gain come into the political season next year. As the Republican, I would say, I don't want to call it a clown show, but it's going to be political kabuki theater almost, what's going on into our season where we have 45,000 people running for President of the United States. I'm concerned that when we're trying to find the right person, they're just trying to oil and polish the machine that's going to run over the eventual very defeated and very battle-worn nominee come June of 2016. The way they look at it is there's going to be an eventual nominee, Hillary Clinton, who's going to be incredibly well-financed, nearly untouched to that point and really unchallenged, with a machine where they're going to know exactly how many votes, where they are, how to get them, to the exact granularity aspect of addresses, phones, and emails. We have to invest in that machine early and often and not always put our resources into just picking the best candidate with the right message. Because, to be quite frank, they could run this glass of water for President of the United States and they'd still win California, New York, and these other states. I mean, we all know that to be true, and that is because they have so many people, of course, dependent on government, and they have a machine that is so effective in getting these segments of the population out to vote. Hillary Clinton is going to run on a couple key things. She's going to run on women's empowerment and all that crazy stuff, even though she takes money from Saudi Arabia and countries that I don't think they believe in women's empowerment, more women's enslavement. She's also going to run on this whole income inequality, funny coming from a woman who made $30 million off speaking fees from colleges and universities. But the other aspect of her campaign that I kind of want to share with you today, that she's going to campaign on aggressively and enthusiastically, is she's going to campaign on, and this is going to be a big issue that we have to combat, unilateral student loan forgiveness. Now, the average student loan debt in this country is $32,000 per student. So if you have a young person that even might be an NRA card-carrying conservative who voted for Mitt Romney in 2012, but he's $55,000 in student loan debt, and you have this politician who promises student loan forgiveness, you might entertain that. And guess what? Their parents will too. What they are trying to create, and I can make a pretty broad argument over the last 40 years, ever since the evolution and the creation of the Department of Education, they have systematically, year after year, got more young people dependent on the federal government, young students in lieu of low-interest student loans to get them to go to college and keep them dependent on the promise and the hope and the little possibility that they might get that loan forgiven. Out of the $1.2 trillion of student loan debt in this country, almost half of it is held by people that never graduated from college. So let me say it again. Over the $1.2 trillion in student loan debt in this country, over half of it, so about $650 billion, is held by young people that never actually got a degree. And those people that did get a degree, the largest percentage of people that have student loan debt that have a degree in something that honestly will not reciprocate in long-lasting employment or high salaries. They studied Western medieval history or Central African basket weaving. And as you all know, these colleges are not trying to prepare young people to be able to make long-lasting careers. They're just concerned about getting more administration staff and an inflated salary for themselves and their research team. Why do I talk about this in a political sense? This could be one of the most dangerous political issues of our time. As you well know, how dependent the Democrats have made the African American community on their policies and their promises. They have created that similar type of issue with young people. It is so personalized, it is so real, that if you ask a young person what your student loan debt is, they'll be able to tell it to you down to the penny. But they can't tell you who the Vice President of the United States is. They have created, through poor governmental policy, or I would say diabolical governmental policy, an issue that could be so powerful in a political sense, it won't matter if we run the most popular pop culture individual for President of the United States. It could be very, very detrimental, because it's easy to keep on promising free stuff and blaming the bad guys. So how do we fight back against this? Unfortunately, there's no really good way to fight back against free stuff when young people are so far into debt. But we have to first illustrate that Washington and not Wall Street got these kids into debt in the first place. 93% of all student loans are administered and given out by the federal government. The Department of Education administers and facilitates trillions of dollars of student loans, payments and repayments a year. When I was a senior in high school, I would be getting daily phone calls from the Department of Education trying to incentivize me to fill out FAFSA, the Department of Education forms, to try to get me to go to my dream school so that I can get a lower interest rate. It's the same type of behavior that created the mortgage crisis back in 2006. It's a big point of concern. What I like to talk about, instead of trying to forgive student loans, let's try to prevent future student loan payments in the future. If you have a leak in your basement, you don't try to shovel water out of it immediately, you try to plug the leak. And my personal opinion is that we shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all interest rate policy on student loans. If you're going to study Central African basket weaving, you should have a different interest rate if someone is going to study engineering. It's a risk pool. There should not be a one-size-fits-all interest rate policy. I don't think the federal government should be in the business of student loans in the first place. That's not going to be a reform that we can, I think, make. But I would love to see a middle ground where you say, all right, if you're going to study something where you're never going to find a job and you're going to work at Starbucks, then fine. You get an 11% interest rate, and someone who's going to study engineering will get a 4% interest rate. And then you can start to, I think, better categorize behavior, and you'll start to see students then make appropriate choices because of it. The worst part of all this, it's almost a vicious circle. Because of the student loan, I would say, Ponzi scheme the federal government is perpetuating on our young people, that directly rises tuition, because then the colleges have no incentive to cut cost. Imagine if you run a business and you are only graduating, or you're only succeeding with half of the people you interact with in your business, and you get paid in full all the time, no matter what, and you have record amounts of people that want to do business with you. Why would you ever lower your costs? And that's what we have in higher education. And it's even worse than a bubble, because there is a societal undercurrent that people say everybody has to go to college to be successful, everyone has to get a 4-year degree, and then you got to get a master's and you got to get a doctorate. However, the job market has become so oversaturated with people with degrees that it's no longer a point of differentiation. It's now just something you put on your resume, and now employees are saying, that's fine, well, what else do you have to offer me? Employers are saying more times than not, a degree is just something that will, make your resume take up a couple more lines. It's no longer something that will even make you more qualified for a position. So what should we advocate for? I think we have to completely rebrand the way we look at higher education, and many of our innovative governors and leaders have done this, and that is we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to invest in college from a public policy standpoint or from an individual standpoint, let's look at it as an investment, just as if we're buying a home, a car, or anything else that we think we're going to get something of reciprocating or equal value out of. And we haven't looked at college in that pretense. It's almost a given. Everyone must go to college, even though half of you don't graduate, and the half that graduate can't even name a United States senator, and those people probably will end up voting for the other side, and they don't even know how to think critically, and they will be indoctrinated through that entire system. So it's multifaceted. It's a big, big problem. And the last thing I will say is this, and I'd love to open it up for some questions. When Obama lost the presidential debate on October 4th of 2012 in Denver, who remembers that? That was when he lost. It was great. Momentum was heading the right direction for the first time in months, and we really felt that the more limited government free market message had momentum. What Barack Obama did the day after is he took a private jet, canceled his whole schedule, took a private jet to Madison, Wisconsin, and held the biggest student rally in the history of the Big Ten for a presidential candidate, and 78,000 young people came out in support of President Obama. When Barack Obama needed a bailout, when the left needs a constituency to lean on, they time and time again go to the millennials and the young people to count for enthusiastic support, boots on the ground, and to be able to get that kind of reinforcement. If we even want to compete in 2016 and beyond, we have to make that investment now. We have to continue to get boots, and as I like to say, and heels on the ground, as we just had our Young Women's Leadership Summit. Some of our most vicious warriors on college and campuses and high school campuses are young women, and we just finished our Young Women's Leadership Summit, as I said, and you don't want to mess with some of these young ladies. They are the most organized, most driven, courageous conservatives that you could possibly ever dream of. And I'll tell you, they threaten the liberals a lot more than just some fraternity brother that's talking about capitalism when you have an articulate, beautiful, young, conservative female that's registering voters and collecting data. It's incredibly powerful. So what our organization is doing is we're committed to over 41 full-time field staff and growing. In this off-election year cycle of fall of 2015, we're registering thousands of new voters in Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Iowa, Wisconsin, etc., collecting hundreds of thousands of lines of new data that then can be used for not just elections, but for greater societal undercurrents and change to really begin to shift the focus away from this dominant big government philosophy more towards a free market-centric individual liberty belief that I think that young people are starving for. If you really tried to design a set of policies that hurt young people specifically, it'd look really close to what this administration has done over the last 6 years, from Obamacare to the absolute explosion of our national debt to just the erosion of the individual liberty on a person-to-person basis that this administration and this belief process has done to young people across the country. I believe firmly that if we continue to invest, not just in election years and set up a shop and then close the shop and set up a shop and close the shop, as all of you know, that's how elections work on the Republican side. We have to do exactly what Obama for America did after he won in 2008. And that is not close offices, but double the amount of offices he had, put more boots on the ground, get more data, refresh the data, pass it on. Because Barack Obama's legacy is not going to be fulfilled in his eyes in an 8-year window. What he's trying to do is get as many people possibly dependent on the federal government, muck up all the bureaucracies, try to scoot a couple more people into the Supreme Court so that his legacy will soon be fulfilled in many other presidents down the chain, where there will be a machine, not just a presidential candidate or president, that will be in place. And once he has that machine, then his ideas will then be put into fruition. And he, as you notice, he spends more time on the political side than the policy side because he's more concerned about having a long-lasting political machine than ever trying to run any sort of governmental, I would say, public policy dominance. His legacy, as he sees it, and it's up to us to stop it, will be, I think, fully implemented, not just in the next 8 years, but over the next 20 to 30. And as we know, the left has successfully played the long game a lot better than we have. And it is indicative in every single one of their groups interacting with each other rather effectively. So as you can see, it's a big fight. Young people represent over 23 million individuals in the voting populace and growing. There's 1 million young people turning 18 every month. It's the fastest growing generation in American history, even faster than baby boomers are hitting retirement age. If we do not continue to engage and educate and sell these values and ideas in a way that they can understand, we will be in a perpetual minority. And if you want to change things, youth have traditionally always been on the cusp of societal and political change. And our organization, and we partner with DHFC a lot on this, are enthusiastically taking that task. So thank you so much. I'd love to open up for some questions. So. Was there possible of any success in California or the UCs? So there's many different ways we measure success at our organization. So we obviously want to build a machine that eventually can generate volunteers and activists and data and registrants that once possibly might have a political result that is favorable. What we're doing in states like California, Massachusetts, and New York is we're starting a rather undercover, underground operation that is designed for one purpose only, and that is to run and win student government association races the same way we look at congressional campaigns. If we can successfully retake the student governments from a student perspective on these really, really far left colleges such as UC Irvine, such as UC Santa Barbara, UCLA, and we run the student government association races with the same money, time, energy, and resources the way we do a congressional campaign, then we can start to see, I would say, an effective neutralizing factor on these campuses where you can control student funding, you can censor professors, you can get rid of free speech zones, you can then balance the curriculum, you then can use your student government post as a bully pulpit. And we've done it successfully in many other colleges. So this has never been done on a broad scale, to try to retake student government associations using our members, our activists, but with a full campaign team and arm, where they wake up every single day Just as if you're running a congressional or mayoral race or a Senate race, trying to develop messaging, flyers, banners, Twitter profiles to try to get that Student Government Association person elected. And it might seem like kind of a silly thing to try to take over student government associations. They control tens of millions of dollars in student funding. And who here has heard of BDS? I'm sure a lot of you. Every BDS resolution is passed because of student governments. So who's heard of this crazy thing to get rid of the American flag at UC Irvine? That's student government. And they use student government associations to push this radical agenda onto these campuses. So we're not going to change the professor's mind. You're not going to get teachers fired. There's tenure. There's all that crazy stuff. But the only vulnerability there is, the only little opening, is student government association races and elections. And we're investing a lot of time and energy and money in it. And you would be amazed. If you spend $5,000 on a race, you can win. You could retake a whole college and university. We did it at Arizona State University. And so we're scaling it. And so in colleges like in California, that's really where our money, time, energy, and resources are going, because 5 people running on a slate at UC Irvine can affect 55,000 students and the fees surrounding it and the culture that then they will be interacting in for many, many years to come. So, all the way in the back. So nothing on our literature or booklets say the words Republican or conservative. And I would encourage you, I have a couple newspapers and booklets right next to the camera there if you want to come by and see it. We talk about values, principles, and ideas, and not politicians, political parties, or pundits. And because of that, we're able to be much more effective. Unfortunately, the Republican, conservative, those two words are incredibly polluted amongst young people. They think they are on team left. And they think they're on team left because of 2 issues, abortion and gay marriage. You subtract those immediately, you talk about individual liberty, skepticism of big governmental power, and the role what America should play here and abroad. It really changes quickly. And I think if you can break down that traditional thought paradigm that the professors have shoved down them, that if you believe in gay marriage and abortion, there's only 2 issues you should ever vote on. And if you look at why young people voted for Barack Obama, that was the highest index of why they turned out, why they supported, and why they voted. You can kind of remove that temporarily and engage them on a couple different issues. You can be a lot more effective. And yes, I mean, UC Irvine is filled with environmental, sustainability, Whole Foods eating, Starbucks drinking, anti-capitalistic leftists that are incredibly tolerant of everyone's views except their own. And, they're intolerant of any views that are not their own. And I think that is incredibly dangerous. However, there is an opening and a possibility for us to continue to engage young people on these more principle-type arguments. And it's tough. I mean, it's tough to sell republicanism to an audience that has been told that's the worst thing, in the history of America. So we have a full-time field staffer here in Dallas. Her name's Stephanie Conway. We have a wonderful chapter at Texas Christian University, SMU, University of Dallas. TCU? Yeah, big chapter there. And actually, Bloomberg, Newsweek came and did a story about our chapter at TCU. It was kind of neat. I could send it out. So yeah, consider what our organization is as a resource to anyone in this room. With 41 full-time field staff, and we have presence on 1,000 campuses, we'll do all sorts of different work from connecting volunteers, activists, speakers, you name it, and that can be a sustainable type of infrastructure. So the vision of what we're trying to create is that we don't have to have this episodic view of youth activism. That you have 3 months of a campaign, all these young people show up to rallies and make phone calls, and then it just disappears, and then everyone wonders what happened to the youth vote. Then it can become how the liberals look at it, which is a 20, 30, 40, 50-year view, where we can have a 24/7, 365 infrastructure and model that can be supported by all these auxiliary groups that then need young people on a sustainable basis. Yeah. So being a 501c3, I have to be careful the way I answer this, but yes. So essentially in Florida alone, we all know Florida is an important state for many different reasons. There's 117 colleges and campuses, universities that have public access. There's over 400 high schools with an enrollment over 2,000 kids. It's an incredible population density that we can be engaging in. So amongst that kind of 18 to 25 demographic, if you just look at the raw numbers, the Democrats have more registered Democrats between the ages of 18 and 26 of a 250,000 person advantage than we have registered Republicans. So there are about 1 million unregistered Floridians that could be engaged. So let's say worst case scenario, 15% of them are conservative Republicans. So we're talking about 150,000 people that are young between the ages 18 and 25 that are not registered, not voting. Mitt Romney lost Florida by 180,000 votes. So We look at the math, we look at where we can have the greatest cost per registrant impact, where we can have the greatest activist amplification impact, and it really just comes down to math. We should never talk in percentages when we talk about elections. Talk about raw numbers. Talk about how many votes you lost by. Percentages are just something they show on TV. If you can look at raw numbers, then you can start to target where you can find the numbers you want to win in the future. So the answer is absolutely. And that we have 6 full-time field staffers that wake up every single day and they go to a college campus and they'll knock on dorm rooms, they'll talk to people, they'll grow chapters, they'll communicate on a person-to-person basis just in Florida alone. We're looking to double that within the next 6 months. So, yes. Yes, it's incredibly difficult. And I'm not going to just make it seem like we can do it overnight. But my perspective is you have to be there, as we are in January of 2015, engaging people on a person-to-person basis and saying why these values, ideas, and principles should relate to them and try to clear up misconceptions that they have, not just about conservatives or Republicans, but about these ideas. And if we can get more young people voting about what they believe and not which letter they want in front of a candidate, that's going to benefit us a lot more in the future. We live in an American Idol-esque election paradigm where young people look at the presidential campaign as if they're voting for American Idol. Which one's more popular? Which one's going to do more for me? And if you can start to get young people to look at it more as, well, which ideas are going to benefit my future or my prosperity, it can be much more effective. And it's difficult because they promise free stuff and we promise freedom. I think freedom is a better message. It just takes longer for me to explain that. And that's why we have to, I think, invest even more early with more energy.
But how do you correct the misconception?
I mean, so I'm not, thankfully, we don't have to, our organization, we're not here to defend the Republican Party or conservatives, but we can defend the ideas. And we can say, you know, you're anti-capitalism, but you should probably stop tweeting from your smartphone and sipping Starbucks. You know, you can point out the hypocrisy in their own beliefs quite easily, you know, and try to penetrate their own defenses with questions. And I mean, a lot of young people don't know what they believe. They just are told who they should support. And those are two completely different things. So, yeah, so we have full-time staffer in Philadelphia and also Pittsburgh, so the east and west sides of the state. I'm not just looking at pure numbers, and that's what I do. I'm not incredibly optimistic that Pennsylvania could be red in a presidential year, statewide for the Republican candidate. However, there are pockets of congressional races that should go red that have been going blue that were, as you well know, traditional blue-collar Reagan Democrats that I don't think have been properly channeled in those areas. I look at Pittsburgh for a really great opportunity. I think the eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania region is a traditionally conservative area that we've been losing. Barack Obama did a wonderful job to engage the union support there and make himself seem like a blue-collar Democrat, where he's the farthest thing from that. I think we have a better field of candidates that can communicate to them. Mitt Romney is probably the worst person we probably could have put up to communicate to a co-worker in western Pennsylvania. They just made him seem like the guy that always comes in and cuts jobs and closes plants. So it's difficult in that sense, but I think there's an incredible potential to begin to turn Pennsylvania back. And the fact that it's become a solid blue state, in some ways, you know, the governor went blue, you know.
Because he raised taxes.
No, I know, and I think it should be red again, and it can be. So.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, yeah, thank you.